Good morning. Welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Honolulu. My name is Steve. I will be your worship associate this morning. We are a free religious community inspired by shared principles and a mission boldly to grow compassion, justice, and joy. We celebrate both diversity and unity as they strengthen each other in a wholeness that fulfills our mission. You are all welcome in this place. Who would like to help us light the chalice this morning? Up, first hand. Come on up here. What's your name?
Eve.
Eve. Help Eve light the chalice. We light this chalice with the embers of compassion. We light this chalice with the torch of justice. We light this chalice with the radiance of joy.
All right, at this time I'd like to invite down children, young and old, any and all ages, 0 to 100. All right, you could chuckle, I know, it was bad. I'm Katie, I'm the Director of Lifespan Religious Education, and let's go ahead and read our story for today. This is called A Rainbow of Friends by P.K. Hallinan. A rainbow of friends is the vision we see when we think about peace and world harmony. Some friends are funny. Some friends are stars. Some friends wear clothing that's different from ours. But all friends are special and add in some way to the richness of life, how we think, what we say. A rainbow of friends is a dream we can share, where everyone's treated with kindness and care. A friend may be challenged in movement or speech. A friend may be distant or difficult to reach. Still, each friend is given a share of our hearts, so no one feels different, unloved, or apart. A rainbow of friends is a chance for us all to help one another when we stumble or fall. We all have our interests. We all have our views. We all have our strengths and weaknesses too. And though we may wander a bit wide or far, our friends still accept us the way that we are. A rainbow of friends is a bonding together that eases our journey through all kinds of weather. If we work hand in hand, all jobs can be done. If we play as a team, we've already won. Our goal can be reached with the greatest success by trusting that others are doing their best. So reach out with love to the people you meet and offer a smile to all those you greet. The world is a family whose happiness depends on a circle of caring, on a rainbow of friends. All right, so with that, let's sing our children upstairs. Can we make a bridge?
Make a bridge.
Thank you so much.
Our kickie off. Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the spirit of love surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go. Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the spirit of love surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go.
Wayne Arneson provides these opening words for us today. Take courage, friends. The way is often hard. The path is never clear. The stakes are very high. Take courage. For deep down, there is another truth. You are not alone.
Please join me for this responsive reading by the Reverend Rob Eller Isaacs. For remaining silent when a single voice would have made a difference. For each time that our fears have made us rigid and inaccessible. For each time that we have struck out in anger without a cause. For each time that our greed has blinded us to the needs of others. For the selfishness that sets us apart and alone. For these and for so many acts that have fueled the illusion of separateness, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. I don't know about you, but lately I've been disappointed and discouraged with every setting I've turned to and every time I witness spiritual starvation going on all around me. I get discouraged whenever I read the news of yet another school shooting because I think to myself, why can't we create a safe environment for everyone born so that they could study in peace? Why can't we create a space where our children can belong instead of getting bullied all the time? And why can't we create a space where violence is not the answer, that offing your teachers and your classmates and yourself is not the only answer, the only solution that we have? And I get discouraged even when I look to the workplace and recognize that the majority of Americans are dissatisfied with their jobs. They're dissatisfied with their bosses. That everywhere we turn, there's a sense of meaninglessness and purposelessness in what people do. Because I thought that work was supposed to be medication. It was supposed to be a solve for your everyday life. It's supposed to bring healing to our world. And yet, that has not been the case. And everywhere I turn, even to places that's supposed to be the example of what leadership looks like, I see moral malnourishment. All I need to do is mention the word Congress, and I think you all would know what I mean. I think it says something that in this country, it takes over 500 days for an executive order to finally be put in place that would stop splitting families apart. That it took over 500 days for 5 million people to finally find a pathway towards citizenship and a pathway towards belonging to this community, this country that was built on immigrants. Don't get me wrong, I'm proud of our president for having the moral fortitude of saying that we too were once strangers. We too were once aliens in a foreign place. Let's not forget that. But 500 days of politicking, posturing, pandering, and whatever other P-alliteration word you could come up with to get this executive order to finally pass. And let's not forget either the moral bankruptcy and the moral malnutrition between the gap between the rich and the poor. All we need to do is look at Wall Street to figure out that our economic system is not working in this country. And if we continue down this path, we'll be just like Haiti in terms of being a third world country, yeah? So, kind of depressing, yeah? And one would think that of all these places I mentioned, the one place where people could get spiritually fed, the one place where there's a high level of moral authority, the one place that we could call the spiritual buffet would be the church. And yet, has this necessarily been the case? Well, I got an email, or actually it was a Facebook post, that brought me to a website called Patheos, or however you pronounce that, PATHEOS.org, that has this article about why churches are losing people. And this author says, and he claims, that it's because we claim to be this great spiritual sanctuary for those who are seeking meaning and fulfillment in their lives. And yet what ends up happening when people start joining churches is their soul gets sapped. And what started happening is that they don't find the spiritual nurturing and the nourishment that they seek. That it resembles more like the political parties that we see that are polarized, that are infighting with each other, that are politicking, that are pandering, that are posturing. That has become the image of what church has been like. And my initial reaction was, has this guy been stalking us? Has he planted a hidden camera in our congregation at some point? But I actually feel like, well, let me let him speak for himself. Here's what he says. It's not surprising, really. Decades and centuries of rules, regulations, formal and informal expectations have created a quagmire of social, quote-unquote, norms that have to be negotiated for doing even menial tasks as simple as using the church's kitchen sink. Those who are willing to brave and navigate the obstacle course for the sake of getting things done ultimately and understandably burn out. And yeah, I got a lot of amens for that. And so this guy says, his name is Mark, by the way. Mark says that, well, the excuse that the leadership gives, church leadership, is usually something like, well, you're a part of a community, and don't you know, community is hard. Here, Mark continues, community is hard? That's not community, that's control. That's not unconditional love, that's playing games of politics and power. That's not spiritual community, that's abuse. Is this the kind of environment, is this the kind of food that we want to be feeding those who walk through our doors, who are hungry for a spiritual community, who are hungry for connection with others who share their values and their principles? Unless we think that Unitarian Universalists are exempt from this quote or exempt from this religious environment, I'll remind you when the Reverend Tandy Rogers preached here a couple years ago, she gave us a statistic. She said there are 700,000 self-identified Unitarian Universalists in the world today. Yet, only 165,000 are actually members of our congregation. And if you want to take the Transylvanian Unitarians, that's another about 100 to 150,000 right there, right? And throughout the world. If you do the math, that's slightly over half of UUs actually belong to a congregation and actually sign a book. What happened to the others? It's not that they went and joined other churches, because it's often said that Unitarian Universalism is the last stop for anyone who wants to ever be religious, right? And it's not like these people don't care. In fact, they do care, because a lot of these people have cared enough to become board presidents. They've cared enough to chair a team or a committee in their churches. What happened to them? They belong to a category called the duns. I've spoken to you about the nuns before, right? The none of the above, spiritual but not religious, or SBNR. These are the dones, people who have thrown their hands up in the air and said, I am exhausted. I am sick and tired of doing all this work only to have people complain to me all the time about what a terrible job I'm doing. Ooh, we're getting somewhere here, aren't we? So, hence the title of his article. Mark's article is entitled, The Rise of the Duns. And that does indeed paint an ominous picture for us. And yet, I am hopeful enough, and I am standing here in front of you today to say that there has got to be a different recipe that would get us to who we aspire to be as Unitarian Universalists. And this recipe I'm calling soul food. Ooh. And what would it mean if we in this church serve soul food 365 days a year? And if we grew and sustained and nourished Unitarian Universalists who don't turn off their values and their principles the moment they step outside the door of the church. What would that look like? Believe it or not, I'm actually going to advocate and say boldly that it's not enough for you to join a team or a committee in this church. I know this is heresy, especially just coming from a convening of chairs meeting yesterday where we all said, we need volunteers for our teams. I suggest to you that it's not enough to have that in order to get the soul food that we're all desperately craving and that we're all hungry for. And it's not even enough to show up to church and sit in the pew once a month. And guess what? It's not even enough once a week. Rather than just being 52 days a year Unitarian Universalists, what would it mean to be 365 days a year Unitarian Universalists? What would it mean for us to live out our values? And rather than just putting your apron on the moment you come to church and say, feed me, Seymour. I mean, not your apron, I'm sorry, your bib, right? Rather than just putting your bib on and saying, feed me the spiritual nourishment that I need, feed me intellectually, feed me whatever-wise, what would it mean for us to put on an apron instead and say, I am here to serve. I am here to serve the soul food that you have been craving for. Not serve us, but service, right? So this is the image that comes to my mind. Simultaneously, we put on a bib and we put on an apron. What would that congregation look like? And what if these small groups, these servings would come in small group sizes? So this is the quandary and the framework and the question that a group of people started asking back in May and June of this year. And what they came up with was this logo that you see in front of you, a group called Chalice Circles. And so, sorry again to disappoint Hilka that SGM does not stand for single gay male, but small group ministry is what SGM stands for, right? And small group ministry and Chalice Circles are meant and conducive to feed us spiritually, to give us the soul food that we have been yearning and hungry for, that our stomachs have been growling for a long time. And what's so brilliant about it is how many of you know where the symbol of the chalice came from? Good, a quarter of you. And those of you, hopefully, too, that attended step 2 will know that this symbol came about during World War II, when the Unitarian Service Committee asked an Austrian artist by the name of Hans Deutsch to come up with a symbol for the USC at the time. And no, it wasn't the University of Southern California, so it wasn't the symbol of the Trojan, right? So the chalice came about because of that. And the chalice represented, well, if you go to the official UUA website, you'll notice in there that it actually tells you people have various meanings that they infuse into the chalice. So it could be a meaning of hope, it could be the eternal flame, whatever meaning you want to have to it. The point that I'm trying to bring up here is the chalice was used as a symbol to point Jews during World War II towards a safe sanctuary. Meaning, I don't know how many of you know, but the original meaning of the Christian symbol of the fish, it's actually an arrow. So wherever the fish's head is an arrow that points towards where Christians were meeting in the catacombs, running away from Roman persecution. So for us as Unitarians, the chalice became a symbol and an arrow to that safe place where Jews could be safely harbored to either America or another place where they could flee from Nazi persecution and being placed in concentration camps. So it's actually a symbol of liberation. And the chalice is a symbol for sanctuary. The chalice is a symbol for hope. And the chalice is a symbol of our third principle, asking us for acceptance of one another and spiritual growth in our congregations. So isn't that a lovely image for a religious movement? That we're here as those subversive people providing a beacon of light, beacon of hope to those who want to find safe harbor. Circles. What do circles symbolize? Any of you wear a ring? Sorry to say I forgot mine this morning again. I know. Tis, tis, tis. But whenever I do a wedding, and whenever I bless this ring, I lift it up and I say, this ring is a symbol of your love for one another. Without beginning or end, they represent eternity. These are the material tokens which represent your spiritual union. By the way, when I was saying this during the 9:15 service, a couple that we have over there started looking at each other with that longing and loving look. And I think it took everything they had within them to not jump up during the middle of the service and yell out, "I do." But as you can tell, it's a moment and a symbol for commitment, right? That we are making a commitment to each other and a covenant. This is a sacred vow that we are making to each other to be there for each other through thick or thin. That we are going to become rainbow friends because of the symbol of the ring. And not just not fine feather, although probably that too, but fine weather friends who are just there for fair weathered. There you go. All right. I know, I'm not old enough for that saying, and English, again, is my fifth language, so I still don't know all the aphorisms that exist out there. But it's a commitment that we are not just going to be fair-weathered friends, but even if it rains, even when our life sucks, we could count on each other, we could call each other at 2 or 3 in the morning and say, I need a ride to the hospital. This is what Chalice Circles are supposed to do for us. And it's a great representation, once again, of our seventh principle, that we are part of an interdependent web of life. And isn't it great that we have this tagline of connection, caring, and community? How many of you, if you weren't raised Unitarian Universalists, the moment you step foot in this door, the moment you plop your okole down on these seats, you thought to yourself, I am home. These are my peeps. This is where I belong. How many of you thought that when you found this place? And so Chalice Circles are exactly that. They're a place to welcome you with open arms and say, welcome home. I know you've been struggling for a long time. I know you're sick and tired and you're exhausted. Plop your feet down, pull up a chair, make yourself at home. This is what it means to form these Chalice Circles. And in this home, we will practice radical care for each other, as I mentioned before. And in this home, we are making a commitment that we are not just going to be a tight-knit, exclusivist family, right? But we are making a commitment that here in this place, we are building a radically inclusive community that is faith-based, that is based on our values and our commitment to our 7 principles. That's what I believe a Unitarian Universalist community ought to look like. Can I get an amen? Amen. And in order to do, and let me share something with you. Millennials are sick and tired. The reason why they don't want to come to church is not just because they don't want to deal with all the political and the organizational BS that goes on in a lot of churches that they go to, but it's because they don't want to belong to yet another country club. They don't want to go to a place where everybody does not look like them or are not concerned with the same things they're concerned with. But rather, people still have that yearning to find meaning, connection. People still want to ask those big questions in life like, what is the meaning of life? What is your purpose for being here? How do you grow compassion, justice, and joy? We don't want just a country club where people hang around at the coffee table and the conversation usually is pretty shallow and goes something like, well, how are you? I'm good. How are you? I'm good. Well, how's the weather? It's all right, I guess. Same as always here in Hawaii, 77 degrees, right? How's the weather for you? You get what I'm saying, right? People aren't necessarily just looking for that in a spiritual community. They want to go deep. And so I believe that this Chalice Circle thing is going to revolutionize our world. That the soul food is going to feed so many. And we start it and we change it 10 people at a time. So rather than, our eyes being bigger than our mouths and us trying to feed ourselves more than we could chew, why don't we start off with small groups of people that are in intentional communities of care for one another for a short period of time? And you want to know what? This model has proven to work over and over again. Any of you who have ever read any copies of the UU World magazine and looked at the breakthrough congregations, you'll notice the word small group ministry listed there almost every single time. And we know it's worked even for this congregation, the Young Families Ohana Covenant Group. What kind of relationships have been built there? And what kind of friendships have been forged there? And what kind of people, when they're going through difficulties in their life, have found solace and comfort and peace through those who are in that group supporting you and lifting you up and feeding you spiritually. I'm going to quote Leia from Star Wars here. I'm asking the Chalice Circles group to say that you are my only hope. Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. So no pressure, but this group will be the one to change our culture here at our church so that there's no in-group, no out-group, but only a we group. Are we ready to change the world? Let me just end with a quote by Margaret Mead that undoubtedly many of you have already heard of before. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. So I'm going to ask the Chalice Circles facilitators to please rise in body or in spirit as they are able to acknowledge you. We have Carla Allison, we have Heather Lemkeld, and we have David Kearns and Connie Winterstein and Jeff Kim. And I thought we had one other person. Oh, Megan. Megan's in the back there. And Martina Quinn, who is not able to be here with us this morning. But while you're remaining standing, why don't we all turn to them somehow or another and send our good thoughts and our energies in their direction and shower them with gratitude for all the hard work and effort that they have put into this and for agreeing to be our food servers. We're counting on you to give us and bring us soul food and for us to participate and commit to this process as well of transforming our lives. Mahalo. And again, at the end of the service, right before lunch, they'll be available right up here to answer any questions you may have about Chalice Circles, small group ministries, or even the meaning of life, right? You're prepared to answer that question? Absolutely. Maybe so.